Well, good morning everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode. This is going to be a vlog number 1, I suppose, and this is one I've been extremely excited about getting prepared, and one I have been preparing for years. I mean, it will probably be broken down into a few episodes because it is such a vast story and such an inspiring one. But it's one like I said before, it's one I'm extremely excited about, and it's going to be talking about Alexander the Great and how he's personally motivated myself. Last time we were on the video, I did show you one of the personal favourites of mine, the campaigns of Alexander. I've also got a great little painting I got quite a while ago as a gift from a relative as well, that's quite a beautiful one to see. I don't know if you can make light of that, but that is Alexander the Great entering Babylonia, or however you would like to pronounce it, but that is at the defeat of the Persian Empire. That is his triumph, and what a glorious set it does look indeed. Lots of class, lots of style. I suppose there's just a lot of what I would scream royalty being spoken of there. But to go into it, I would like to talk about how Alexander personally inspires me, and I'd like to go into a few of his stories, and we'll start with his early ages, and we'll start with a few of the main factors in his life, I believe, which would be, first of all, Aristotle. Secondly, King Philip, which is naturally his father, his alleged father anyways. And now King Philip was a bit of an enigma in his own right, I would say personally. I mean, the impression I get is a man who was very tough, very resolute, barbaric in a lot of senses. He had a lot of them old rituals that sort of stuck with Macedonia, you know, the drinking, the, if you want to go as far as saying the pillaging, the old, ancient sort of barbaric masculinity. Definitely had that, and leaps and bounds, but also he had that sort of thinking mind as well. He was definitely a stratagem, definitely a general in the case of he led his men, fought with his men, knew how to definitely, I mean, cater to his men, knew the logistics of war, knew the purpose of war, and just in general was a great man. And upon being incarcerated in Athens was partly the time that Philip would have noticed how the Greeks used the phalanx so well, and probably came upon this realization that it could be improved upon. That was the first time in the ancient world at the time that someone like Thebes, Athens, Sparta had ever really considered re-engineering their weaponry, or looking at different formats of warfare. And now increasing the phalanx's size might have been something that seems quite trivial, but it actually turns out to be such a huge pivotal point, as long as many other reforms. But King Philip is somebody who brought Aristotle from Athens to Macedonia to teach his son Alexander. He's also somebody who inspired great beliefs in strong morals in Alexander, whether it be physical, down to wrestling, or teaching him ways of warfare or hunting. He would have definitely learned a lot that way. He also had a very, very strong-minded mother in Olympias. Again, this is another very big factor of Alexander's life. I think Olympias was almost the case with many great successes, being quite a mama's boy, aka like Genghis, Napoleon, Alexander himself. I think she installed a great destiny into Alexander's mindset from a very young age. I mean, I know he was already learning different languages at a very young age, and instruments. There was a very famous story about Persian travellers coming over to Macedonia actually, and being sort of quizzed by Alexander at the age of 4 or 5. He was asking sort of what routes into the cities. Then when you shut again, the great inspiration, what I believe Olympias would have been Alexander, force feeding that destiny down him, that family sort of lineage, being through Heracles and Achilles, because through Epirus and through Macedonia, obviously Olympias from Epirus, the other side of Greece, and Alexander's father Philip from Macedonia, they both claimed lineage to very, very ancient warriors of Greek history and Greek dynasty. So already Alexander was growing up with a very strong, for nature of these very strong parental relationships. I believe Alexander was already being brought up with a tug-of-war sort of mentality, and how the parental styles and how both were sort of almost competing with each other was so evident. I mean, it can be even sort of compared to today's day and age, whether it be Christmas or a birthday, how parents might compete with one another to sort of painstakingly beat, or quote unquote beat each other at being the better parent for a moment. I think Olympus and Philip were very much engaged in that sort of rhetoric. Very much the case until Philip met his newly young wife anyways, and that would have caused a very... I think that's when the alleged assassination plot that Olympus had held for Philip would have definitely started taking effect, or definitely the ball would have started rolling, I believe, then. But my point sort of being is that these figures in Alexander's life have definitely driven him to have egotistical, if you would like, view of yourself before even hitting adulthood or even teenagehood, and to definitely be trained by Aristotle from such a young age. I mean, you have great friends in Hephaestion, Ptolemy, Nicanor, Philotas, I mean, Clytus. These are a lot of these companions that you're going to hear again in a lot more vlogs and stories going forward, because these are going to accompany him through the rest of his life, really. And I think that's another amazing quality that really fills the fire on myself. Is I think it's absolutely incredible how Alexander, essentially, as a group of children, different ages, from different family backgrounds, whether it be, well, they would have been very poor to have been, I mean, very rich to have been the king's bodyguard. But in terms of growing up together as a group, the camaraderie, the lessons of life, I mean, the idea of almost, wildly off topic, but even the sort of, the very famous horror film It by Stephen King, I think the idea of how the youngsters come together with what seems to be a lot of weaknesses apparent to the viewer, like them being sort of frail or fragile, etc. And it's so impressive when they bring together the little strengths or uniquenesses that they have that is very personal to them or individual to them, and they come together and form such a strong unit that it's the sort of envisionment I imagine with Alexander's companions, that they all wouldn't have been great wrestlers. I mean, they would have been obviously good at wrestling, but there would have been one more exceptional than others. Like my personal friends, I have a great friend who's an absolute athlete, I mean, built like it as well, built like he was made on Olympus. And then I have another friend who's not so much as athletic, but you would not beat beat him in a game of chess. So it goes along both ways, and to combine them both skills together, you could get a great unison, a great team. And I believe the idea of the companions growing up together, learning different skills, and some surpassing others and advancing in others, and making such it almost is like a ancient or medieval gang as such, that has a lot more principle together, that has them sort of hierarchy steps, whereas, you know, Alexander's best friend Hephaestion, Ptolemy, again, the structure is just, I personally believe that it allows the opportunity for great recognition. I think that's how Alexander would have inspired so much courage in his men, because having such a personal relationship from a young age together would have inspired acts of great bravery. It would have made him almost enforced to do it, because of having that image that he's portrayed to them for so long. He wouldn't have, and known his lineage, known his family, known the childhood, and they would have been very much accustomed to it. Fears a completely different lever in today's present day than it is in the ancient day. But I honestly believe that, just in general, the attitude of having such a close brotherhood was already setting in stone just the pathway for a great embarkment and an adventure, which is something I'm going to touch upon. But not go into that too much. I realise I am getting extremely passionate about that. We will start off very early in Alexander's life. I'm going to talk about him taming Bucephalus, which is his, well, probably the most famous steed horse in history in the known world. And this would have been, I believe it was bought for about 12 talents. I could be wrong, they don't quote us exactly on that, but it'd be around that number. And in terms of that being an extremely amount of money at the time, this was given to King Philip. So it was offered to the king at first, not Alexander. It was offered to him as a gift, as being a Thessalian horse, which at the time produced, so I know they still do produce great quality horses, but in the ancient world, at that known time in ancient Greece, it was some of the best riders and the best ridden horses came from Thessaly. So in terms of this absolute big, I mean, touching upon a bit of its appearance at first, it was also a big black horse with a white encrestment on its head. It was given the name Bucephalus, which is meaning ox head, and because of the size, it was a very big horse. It was meant to be a very daunting one as well. And in terms of being offered to the king, it was very agitated, very aggressive, was meant to be all over the sort of riding school, in terms of causing quite a fuss. Now I'd imagine this to be very daunting to a lot of people watching, especially when the king was almost not afraid, but very didn't want to really get involved with the horse, said that it was mad, wanted it took away. Upon this, a young Alexander in an age of 13 actually stood up and along those lines said to his dad, why would he refuse, or why would he get rid of such a great horse just because he personally couldn't ride it, and that if he was to let him, Alexander, tame the horse, ride the horse, that he could have it, and if he could not ride the horse, that he would pay for it himself. And that really shocked Philip, I'd imagine, and it would have almost, I'd imagine, embarrassed him a little bit in front of Black Clytus, the great general, Parmenion, great friend and general of Philip, whose sons were Philotas and Nicanor, which we'll get into that. But my point being is that this would have, even in today's age, when a son might try and scorn a father or show a father up, I mean, it isn't it shouldn't be took as a negative, but it almost certainly is, because of what we have as a pride. I mean, personally, we all can forever learn, can forever make mistakes, and that is the beauty of failure, hence why I want to fail, but not to drift off too much, being as that it sort of embarrassed his father to a little degree. And upon this, and allowing Alexander to try and tame the horse, Alexander had already noticed that, being very intelligent, already thinking outside the box, and this is one trait that Alexander's going to really showcase a lot throughout his life, is that he's always thinking outside the box. And I believe that he only would really speak when he was very confident in his ability or the outcome of his ability. And I think that's such a great trait, where a lot of us will speak far too, including myself, I'll speak far too soon when I feel confident, before actually having that full, well, knowing that that full commitment is there. For example, I wouldn't, playing basketball, I would normally do the whole, I'm going to score this 3-pointer regardless of it scoring or not. I would say it very, very much too early, and I hadn't even sort of got down the court yet. So in terms of being a little bit cocky is a trait that could maybe surpass that, and we should reel it back a little bit. But with Alexander, upon being allowed this challenge, actually realised that Bucephalus was very timid, quite looking down to its shadow, very afraid of its shadow, was very confused by its shadow. And upon this, Alexander, going up to Bucephalus, actually brought it around into the direction of the sun, so that its shadow would be on the opposite side, in terms of this way not being directly under the horse and not scaring the horse as much. This actually calmed the horse down in a little degree, and it's what I believe would have had that instant mutual trust between man and beast. And I believe from that moment onwards there was an inseparable connection between the two, one that has been immortalised through art, history, film, and just in general. The name Bucephalus has been spoke about 2,000 years on, and it's a horse. Is that not amazing? It is to me. I mean, there's people, I mean, there's human beings who have done so much with their life that I spoke about 200 years on, never mind a horse that is still written in history to this day. So in terms of being an absolutely incredible feat, one that I would like to point out, that once coming back down, Black Clytus was amazing. King Philip actually ran up with almost tears in his eyes, joyful, saying to Alexander, "My son, look for a kingdom bigger than thee, because Macedonia is too small for thee." And upon that, he already knew that Alexander's ambition and his intentions were already going to be great and already going to be far beyond his own. And I believe that can automatically touch upon my next little quick brief story. And this is all happening before the age of 20, by the way. Alexander began his great campaign in 334 BC against the Persians, and we're talking about a young, restless, brilliant commander, someone with absolute bundles of energy, would lead by example, would lead from the front. And this is what amazes me personally. He would never ask anybody to do something that he wouldn't do personally, and that leadership has gone mostly in today's age. I would be one of them individuals that I would, if I was to ask somebody to clean the bin, I'd be cleaning the bin with them, first in, last out. And that old siege of another quick example that we will be touching upon in further vlogs, this is obviously episode 1 of Alexander, is even on the siege of Tyre, which we will get to later in his campaign. There was a moment where it was, the toil was very hard, very strenuous, and Alexander actually give the workers that day the day off, or rest and respite, and then proceeded to go about working himself individually, alone. And upon realising the king was still pushing these toils and still wanting the work, that the soldiers actually give up the day off of rest and want to go and join in. Now that's the charisma, and that's the example of how great this man actually was. I believe, I mean, don't get us wrong, he had some bad traits and did some despicable decisions, just like most characters really have to. I mean, the lever of good and bad normally strays very, very close to each other. It just depends on the individual's emotion or perception at the time, and that goes for all of us, regardless of how strong-willed we want to be. Even Marcus Aurelius, who, you know, preaches Stoicism, would have had to go through a lot of trial and error of his own emotion to reach that level of plateau of Stoicism. But again, not to go too far into it, we are going to talk about very briefly the Battle of Chaeronea, which is a very much one of my favourite battles of Alexander, because he's so young at this age, still 16, 17, and he's just been given sort of charge of the companion cavalry, which is an elite group of horsemen that is dedicated to almost being the king's bodyguard, but almost I would like to say that special cavalry unit, put in layman terms, it's just a more advanced cavalry unit with better training that is ridden with the king or for the king, or the king will ride at the helm of this unit. Normally in a wedge formation you would have a lot at the back and the king would be right at the front, and Alexander made his own mission to be the number one uno, right at the front, top dogzilla. He was up there, first in the battle, last in, had many wounds throughout his military campaigns, and we'll get into a lot of them, including very early into his life, including the battle we're going to be talking about. This is an individual that relished personal glory, relished warfare, relished the idea of being a hero, and I think in the ancient Greek world, being a hero or having heroic lineage or destiny was so important. And now, going to the Battle of Chaeronea, we have to understand the principle of this fight. So what's the principle of the fight is, as I was touching about before, just very running over it briefly, Philip has sort of reformed Macedonian strength, Macedonian military. He's brought in the sarissa, which is an 18-foot spear. This has replaced the older spear, which was a lot shorter, you know. This sarissa has given the Macedonians a very comfortable edge. They have now been able to bring a professional military into the... Basically, rather than being vagabonds and barbarians coming from the hills and mountainside, they're being trained, they are wearing armour, wearing skin. In terms of now becoming a professional unit, they'll be being paid for their military sort of reforming. They'll be practicing drills, tactics, the logistics of war, the preparation of the physicality of man for war, or etc., or young males. And upon this, Athens and Sparta would have got a little bit sort of noticed that this sort of usurper up north, Macedonia, is starting to build a bit of power. And upon this, Athens were really not too happy about that. You had some of the Demosthenes who would have been preaching in Athens about how this is going to be the next big tyrant, the next usurper. This needs to be struck down now before it is too late. And once agreeing with Thebes, which not many people know about, and I believe this is due to Alexander, not outright just to him, but I believe once a nation gets completely wiped from history, right from the books, right from the land, gets razed to the ground, it makes it very, and also selling to slavery, it makes it very hard for that culture to have a history and to pass through the ages. I mean, we still know about Thebes, of course, because before this time it was an almost monumentally important city-state of Greece, and hugely powerful. I mean, we have to remember the sacred band of Thebes was the first military unit to absolutely vanquish the legendary 300 Spartans, and when I say vanquish, I mean become the powerhouse of ancient Greek. It become the top heavyweight of ancient Greece, I would like to say, at the time. And the Thebans, just touching upon them very quickly, was a sacred band of also 300 individuals that were took from birth. Males would be paired with another male from birth, not allowed to relate or be with anybody else for the rest of their life. They would eat together, sleep together, hunt together, train together, would also become intimate together, in the sense of that they believed that falling in love, or having that, not necessarily our version of love, you know, the whole love hearts, teddy bears, the cards, etc., and that whole business of love, more the idea of actual love, in terms of they need this person to be alive, to be able to hunt together, feed together, fight together, that sort of love where they actually needed each other like two wings on a bird, in terms of they would fight to the absolute tooth and nail. And I can touch upon this where in the Battle of Chaeronea, where, so again, I know I'm sort of very much back and forward a bit from A to B to C to B to A. I'm going to try and build that up. This is still my first video, so the awkwardness still might be there, the little bit of the gaps. This will improve with time, and the passion's there, the fire is there naturally. And touching upon what I was talking about, the Battle of Kyrenia, about the principle of it, and going into a little bit of the quick of why it's happening. So again, with Athens sort of fearful of this usurper in the North Macedonia, they brought together Thebes in to make a very powerful powerhouse to take down basically this upcoming tyrant of King Philip. Now, upon King Philip giving Alexander a role in leading the companion cavalry, this is a great opportunity for Alexander to prove his bravery, his courage, all his teachings under Aristotle, which has been, I mean, we're talking about herbology, the astrology, warfare, logistics, literature, reading the Iliad, which Alexander became obsessed with, the story of the great Trojan War and Achilles. So this isn't just everyday lessons that I might have had growing up in school. I mean, don't get us wrong, we learn things that are so important like mathematics, university, English, literature, but I believe that Alexander would have got a very, very unique, very tailor-made education for himself. I mean, the best in the ancient world. We have to remember that, I mean, then in hindsight taught Alexander the Great, so he's come from the greatest line of philosophers. That was his personal education. The mindset would already have been leaps and bounds beyond the average Joe at the time, I would like to say. But yeah, touching upon the battle formation, so I'd imagine we've got Alexander sort of on the left of the Macedonian line. You have Philip on the right controlling the phalanx, and obviously you've got a lot of the sort of foot soldiers, a lot of shield bearers, etc. in between. And on the other side you have the Theban sacred band parallel opposite to Alexander, and you also have the Athenians. Now upon the battle, I mean, we're going to go upon it very briefly. I'll touch upon it with more detail in the next video because we are getting towards the end of the time on there. What ended up by happening was the misjudgment and misleadership of the Athenians and the Thebans end up actually causing a gap in the line where the Athenians progressed very quickly, very confidently and aggressively, whereas the Thebans stood their ground, believing in their own resolution. They weren't going to be led by anybody. They weren't going to be told what to do on a battlefield by anybody, which again is quite a double-edged sword. They were extremely powerful, extremely efficient, and would die to the very last man. But however, they wouldn't listen to other orders, most definitely. Well, unless I'd imagine they were clearly the right order to be chosen from. I couldn't imagine a great general refusing good orders if there was the right decision, like retreating to high ground for a fight, for example, or not crossing the water whilst it was manned by spearheads on the other side of the embankment. But my point being is that they wouldn't listen to anybody, and upon this gap, Alexander had a young but very sharp mind, that age of youth as well, being on his side, noticed the gap, and upon this charged the companion cavalries. What I'd imagine had been the hooves, the feeling, the fear, the noise, everything that would get a man exhilarated or a woman exhilarated would just be pumping through the body. The adrenaline would be going crazy to make that ride for the gap, to have got through it. Upon that, instantly cutting the two armies into half, one the Thebans, one the Athenians. The Macedonians could then almost start to work upon that hammer and anvil tactic that Alexander would later go on his life to absolutely master, where the infantry would sort of push them against, and then the horses would come around the back and really swedge it in, and it would almost be good night. But upon that, Alexander encircled the Thebans and was actually ultimately in the end shocked that the Thebans fought to the very last man, to the very last couple of two. And upon this greatly aroused Alexander's emotions, greatly aroused his... He was insanely impressed with his feat of courage that he actually built, well, erected a monument, a lion of Kyrenia, funnily enough, over the dead body of the 300, well, sacred band of Thebes, in sort of a testament to their strength, and a testament to their absolute courage. I believe a courage in men that we really see today and age. But that is sort of wrapping up vlog 1 on Alexander. We'll be touching upon in the next video. We'll be wrapping up the Battle of Kyrenia, going into a bit more detail. Obviously we know now that he's had such a great education. He's got a very strong friendship base growing up from other powerful families in the Macedonian world. So we already know that he's a very popular young lad. I mean, obviously he's Prince of Macedonia, so he's going to be, but he's got a very strong wealth base through his other families, via his friends, via them friendships with his father. He's also got a very strong mother and father in terms of their views, their religions, their ideas for his future. He also has been taught by the greatest mind of that time, Aristotle. He has also already had military experience when his father has been away at war himself, conquering a little bit around Greece, which I didn't really touch upon during his younger years. When Philip went on a little excursion, Alexander did go on his own little pitter-patter and he got in a lot of trouble, shall we say, for trying to change taxes and changing city to his own name so young, and was actually quoted on saying that if his father kept going on the way he was, he would be very upset because he wouldn't have anything left to do himself, and that was something that he really wanted to do. He yearned for glory so young. But yeah, we've touched upon that, and we're starting to get into his sort of very early military engagements. We've had his almost miracle-like-esque engagement with Bucephalus. Very much, if there was ever destiny provided, there has to be that. I mean, for grown men who couldn't ride horses to end up by being a teenage boy, realising, I believe, spirit and animal came together there. But we've touched upon a lot of them, and we're going to go into the next video. We're going to go into how Alexander started to get ready for his great campaign of Persia. What he ended up by doing with Thebes, and how he treated Greece, Athens, Thebes, Sparta, etc. How he treated these city-states before going on such a great campaign, because you've got to remember he's going to be leaving these sort of at the mercy of his doorstep whilst he's out there conquering new lands, new worlds, and going for his dream and